Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Gatewood, and I am the Communications and Marketing Director at CFRE International. And today I am joined by Carlos Trejo, and he is a new CFRE. He's been a CFRE for just about 4 months, so the process is very fresh in his mind. And he's going to give a little bit of advice and some insight for other people that are considering earning their credential. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So what motivated you to want to become a CFRE?
I have been thinking about it for a long time, and to be honest, I didn't always think it was going to be for me or something that I was going to do, but it wasn't really until I took a look at the application and all of the requirements, and I kind of realized I've already like fulfilled everything that I've needed to fulfill. I might as well just take this test and get the credit. And throughout the process too, I also just realized like what a validating experience it would be for me, and just kind of like a stamp of approval that says like that tells the world, Carlos knows what he's talking about when it comes to fundraising.
Awesome. And how long had you been in fundraising when you went for your CFRE?
Oh gosh, just over 10 years in my fundraising career, with multiple roles, multiple levels. Yeah, and I just finally felt like it was the right time to take that step.
Yeah, so you handily met that 3-year requirement. Very good. And can you talk us through how you studied for the CFRE exam and which materials you used?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very fortunate enough to follow on the tail end of some colleagues of mine who had gone through the CFRE process, and I really relied on them to help sort of guide me in figuring out like what the best way for me to to set up my study sessions would be and to be successful. And they gave me a lot of great advice, like join a study group, and I was able to join Jack Alato's study group, which I know he's a highly recommended leader in the field and runs a really awesome study group, which I highly encourage everyone to attend. I had a study buddy throughout all of the summer and fall before I tested, and this was a person that I would connect with maybe once a week just to review questions that we had, things that we had read in the Achieving Excellence in Fundraising book, which was a really great resource. We relied on the study guide. We relied on the sample test that was made available to us. And we really just relied on what was available to us and on all the resources that previous CFREs had shared with us and the advice that they had given us. So I highly encourage folks to talk to folks who have gone through the CFRE process, because there's a lot of great insight they can provide to you in terms of preparing for the exam.
Yeah, that's always great when people can connect with somebody who's gone through it themselves. I think that demystifies the process quite a lot.
Absolutely.
And for anyone who is contemplating their CFRE, we know a lot of people go back and forth in their minds quite a bit before they actually take that step and submit their application. What would be two pieces of advice that you would have for anyone who's a little bit like, oh, should I do this?
Yeah, I think like just start the application. It doesn't cost you anything to start recording your achievements, to start documenting your professional development experiences. I think that gives you a great sense of like how ready you are to take the exam. Like I said, I hadn't really realized like how ready I was for it until I looked at the application myself and started filling the things out. So I think that's a great piece of advice is to just start the application, and if you submit it in by the end of the week or in 3 months or in 6 months, like, you will submit when you are ready, and you will know when you are ready and when that's best for you. I think other pieces of advice I would give are to just really go into this process and this exam recognizing that our professional experience does not always align with what the CFRE exam presents to you. And that was something I certainly learned through the study groups and through some of the reading is, there are best practices that we are taught, and then there's sometimes the things that we just do at work because that is the reality of how we need to do things. So there's a lot of like unlearning that we have to do as part of the process. I think we need to remember that it is a very donor-centric exam, and that was a great way to always like help frame the questions as I was reading them. And I think just overall is to give yourself the time to study. I know it is probably the most difficult exam that I've taken within the last couple of years. So I think even just learning how to take an exam was part of the process for me as well. Like it's been a while since I've been in college, since I've had to take like a rigorous test. So even just relearning like how to prepare for an exam and how to read a question and how to really figure out like what is it that I'm being asked was part of the process for me.
And that advice to think about the best practices and maybe not necessarily how your organization does it, I think that's such a great point that you make because there are people who definitely come to this exam and they answer the questions for how they would do something. And, it's not to say anybody's being unethical, but maybe they're doing something in a certain way because their boss mandates it or it's just been that way for 25 years and if that's not the best practice and you're answering for how you do it, that's not gonna serve you terribly well on the exam.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so very good point there. All right, any parting words of wisdom?
Just I would say, like, absolutely take a look at your calendar when you're planning on when to take your exam and like backtrack when that studying is happening. I know I struggled a little bit with balancing end of year fundraising with getting ready for the exam. So I think just be conscious of like your workflow and when your busy season is, and give yourself the grace and give yourself the time to just really be able to focus.
Excellent, excellent advice. Well, thank you so much, Carlos, for speaking with me today and sharing what you learned through the process. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.